giving you a voice,
making it loud our own way.
Welcome to the fun.
So, RC, can you start us off with Team 134?
134, I thought it was a pretty cool robot. I mean, obviously it ranked high in the bidding. I gave it pretty good on details. I don't know. I like the drivetrain. I don't know. I had a whole lot of comments for this one personally. I didn't really put a lot of information down, so I'll pass it off to the next person.
All right, Casey, how do you feel about it?
So yeah, I agree that it was very detailed. One of the things it attempted to do was a climber to go all the way to the top. I thought that it'd work for level 1, maybe a chance at level 2, but it's one of those, there are a few like this that the hooks are so far forward when they're grabbing onto the bar that I think it would really be pivoting out and down around the bar, maybe not able to reach that next hook. Definitely go take a look at 254's 2013 robot and pay attention to how far back those hooks are to make sure that the robot was relatively balanced to send the next bars up, because I think this robot might have just tipped over backwards as it climbed and not been able to reach the next one. But overall, I thought it was a really good robot. Intake looked effective, and swerve should help.
All right, Clint, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I love their under the bumper attempt at the intake. I thought that was a really clever way to keep a rigid frame, like we've been talking about all show. Getting under the bumper with these thin game pieces is definitely possible. They attempted it. The detail looked like it was there to make that work. I agree with what Casey said, and that was a theme I thought all weekend. Teams were neglecting to consider their robot CG when they were attacking the bar. A lot of these robots looked like they would pivot the wrong way to climb, and you'd end up with like a 148 2013 style where your robot's like flipping over 4 times before it grabs the next rung. No offense to them, they did great, obviously.
It worked.
It did for them. It worked for them.
Most of the time.
Yeah, I never actually got to the third level.
But I love this robot. I think the detail was there. I think all the support things we've talked about, they were a team that they said switching from Inventor to SolidWorks, so this was kind of a new tool for them. Went with the double, the 2-speed swerve drive, which was a bit audacious. Overall, I thought a great submission.
All right, Garrison, anything else to add?
Yeah, I loved their 2-speed swerve, actually. I thought it was really good. It was very heavy, though, which was, that's one of the bigger drawbacks of swerve. But, this was especially heavy. Their CG it's a little higher than a lot of robots, again, because of swerve, just where they ended up with everything. I was kind of worried about their CG, but not just while climbing. I thought there was a chance that they could have a couple other problems. But yeah, again, I love the under the bumper intake. I think that rigid frame is something a lot of teams take for granted. I've been working on, designing a new drivetrain with the Wranglers, and rigid frame is basically where we start. It's really, really important. And I thought this robot did a really, really good job. And these are 2 guys that were on a rookie team last year, 6,800 out of Austin. So great job.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so we're going to get to our 9th ranked team, which is 189, made up of Josh Carlson. Casey, can you start us off?
So team 189, I thought one of my favorite parts about this was the intake seemed like it should be relatively effective. That roller leading out front rolling over the top seemed like it'd be able to pull discs in relatively well. It just looks like it might be a little awkward to hold more than one disc at a time without having to do the handoff, and the handoff looked like it might be a little bit awkward, but I think if that's ironed out and looks a little bit better than I could see in the renders. It seemed like it was a robot that should be pretty effective. It had a decent amount of detail, but some things were still missing as well.
All right, Clint, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, definitely scored high on the creativity side for me. I thought the drawer slides on the intake to get it out in front of the bumpers and down was pretty nice. I thought the angle for the pickup might have been a bit steep. And like Casey said, the handoff of one disc to the next might have been difficult if you were trying to pick up 2 in quick succession. Overall, though, amazing detail. I think really high effectiveness. This is a robot that I had pegged during the judging process as being very near the top, and it's good to see that they ended up here. Yep.
All right, Garrison.
Yeah, I gave him pretty good scores as well. kind of as our judges said, I was worried about the frisbee path through the robot as it enters. I wasn't real big on how it got into the robot, but I think again a couple quick prototypes, maybe adding like some extra omni wheels on the outside, something to bring the frisbee into that lift would help tremendously. And yeah, I think if you can get that handoff down, if you can automate it and not have to do it manually every time, like we saw a lot of teams try and do this year, I think you could definitely get this robot to a really good point. But there's a lot of software that would have to be done with this robot, with the swerve drive and the handoff and controlling how to hold all of this stuff. Also, I was a little worried about how much weight was so high up in the robot all the time. You have that mini sim, I think it's a mini sim, maybe it's a full-size sim, up like near the top of that elevator, powering those rollers with a gearbox. You have some more gears and stuff up there. There's just a lot going on to lift your CG. Just a little bit worrying. And they didn't have a hang, which for a robot this high in the rankings is a little upsetting. At least a level 1, they've got an elevator. But again, they ranked very well in all the categories. They did very, very solid robot.
Definitely. So RC, end us off.
I think just what everybody else said, I love the creativity in the robot. I hate the ISO grid pattern. I think I spent all day milling that out. But beyond that, it's a pretty cool robot. I like that it has perfect structure on supporting the intake rotation. Handoffs for me are never a good thing. I don't know. But it's too much work to automate it. I think there's a lot of software that has to go into it, kind of like what everybody else said. So for me, I thought it was a good top 10 robot. It just wasn't my favorite for today.
All right. So let's move us to our 8th ranked team, which is Team 250, made up of Justin Yu and Chun-Chi Lo from FRC 3158. Clint, can you start us off?
Yeah, so immediately this team kind of got on my bad side with their team name, Cheesecake Macadam Swerve. I like one of those 3 things. They scored very well in the it's not Swerve. They scored well in creativity and effectiveness. They had kind of an elevator and an arm design, so it's like a double jointed arm on a single stage elevator, which I thought was kind of interesting. We've talked about several times, they are able to score the discs in a downward fashion directly into the goal, so they don't have to rely on any sort of bouncing around up at the top. They've got the climber. I think the detail was there as far as the electronics packaging goes. Overall, very clean robot.
Definitely. Garrison, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought I was missing a couple of things, though. I think their intake wheels are too far back. I've said that a couple of times. I think they need to be out more towards the front. There's really no reason they aren't in this robot. There's a lot of, again, software stuff that would have to happen here. This robot reminds me a lot of 971 in 2016, with all of that nonsense motion profiling and stuff, which, I mean, y'all remember that robot. It was dominant. Like, it was a very, very good robot, but that is with 971's programmers and all the software help they have going on. One of the lead controls teams in FRC. I think if most teams wanted to build that robot, they would struggle pretty hard. And I think, this elevator needs a little bit more cross support. You've got, kind of 2 independent towers going up most time and pretty much nothing in between. I'm worried about some side loads on there and how it's mounted to the chassis, because the whole thing also still tilts. So I think you could end up with forces in weird directions there, especially if you're trying to, kill it around like 971.
Yep. All right, RC, jump in there.
I like the robot too. Great color scheme. I think kind of what Garrison said, the elevator needs more support. I feel like when the arm wants to feed through, you may run times where it's clipped or stuck, which is always a huge concern for me when people do like pass through or something like that. It's always like a worry for me personally for reliability's sake. So that's why I kind of scored lower for me personally. Electronic, I think you have the whole space. You kind of did this like weird thing on the bottom. Definitely need to improve that. I think the detail was really good, and the intake rollers drive me nuts as well. I saw that too much this weekend where the plastic hits the frisbee every time. So that's it for me.
All right, Casey, end us off.
Yeah, so similarly on the intake, it also seemed like it was one of a few of them that it seemed like it'd be a little bit awkward to get two into the tray. You can't see it as well in this angle, but they kind of have to stack up on top of each other, I think, if I remember right. Also, this was another one that the climbing hooks were pretty far forward. It might be able to pull it off because it's got so much freedom of motion, but it's one that it seems like complicated to get the climber to end up in a big reclined angle. That would be hard to deal with, but with the freedom of motion, you might be able to get there.
All right, so that's going to bring us to our 7th ranked team, which is Team 246, made up of Jack and Jonas Wagner from FRC 2826. So, Garrison, can you start us off there?
Yeah, sure. So I liked this robot because they had a very good strategy, and it translated directly into how they built their robot. In their scouting sheet, they outlined exactly what they wanted to do, and I thought they did it pretty well. They can hold 2 discs fairly effectively. They have a solid elevator. They have the climb. They just weren't missing a whole lot. And so, I gave them very high scores in all categories. They had most of the stuff going on that they needed to.
Yep. RC, how do you feel about it?
Same thing. They did a very good job. I love the level of detail. I think the swerve could be a little smaller. And then beyond that, I think they did a very good job. They ranked high for me as well. No complaints here.
Definitely. Casey, what about you?
Yeah, this one, ranked high for me as well. One of the small concerns was it looked like their breaker was under one of their climbing hooks, which seems a little concerning. I couldn't exactly tell the freedom of motion, but it might seem like it climbs to the top and then turns itself off, which is never a good thing. But sometimes you see things like that where robots turn themselves off. It's never a good look. Other than that, I like the amount of detail that was in there. It's a good robot. Looked like the climb may actually work because the hooks are closer to the center of gravity this time. Still maybe a little off, but it looks like it's got a better shot than some of them.
Yeah, definitely. Clint, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I had one concern with this robot, and it was so this robot utilizes like a 3-wheel swerve, right? So they're in a triangular pattern, and when you get the elevator way up in the air, you've got basically a super tall moment of inertia, which I think could pretty easily topple it outside of that triangular swerve pattern. So I was a little concerned about that. I agree with what Casey said. I think the climber for this robot is probably more realistic than some of the others we've seen. And they had all the detail there. The swerve modules themselves were, maybe a little heavier than they needed to be. The intake looked good. The elevator looked good. It was well supported. So overall, great robot. I'm a little concerned about the tip over aspect with the 3 swerve modules there.
Yep. All right. So that's going to bring us to our last team outside of the top 5, which is Team 215, made up of William Marsh and Ben Ndara from FRC 1477. RC, let's hear how you feel about this one.
Alex one too was pocketed heavily, so it was pretty cool. But one thing I did not like about the elevator is that it had 2 slots, so therefore the bearing had to go in the middle. You're pretty much like make sure the shaft is super far out, and it seemed like you used 3/8X. So pretty much the probability of bending that is pretty high. And even with our route this year, we used a bunch of steel portions for our shaft, and we bent a bunch from just getting loaded and hitting the walls and just areas this year. So I recommend reducing the lightning on that 1-inch face. The rest of it was pretty cool. I think the chain of the tube had me a little, I think I was a little annoyed because I didn't realize how the chain ran actually worked on this one. I'm looking at the correct robot. Yeah, because I think there's rivets. Yeah, because there's rivets going down. So I was wondering if they did chain the tube with the rivets in line with the chain. So I think that's my only concern about this, and that's about it.
All right, Casey, jump in.
Yeah, so this one, I liked how they kind of integrated the climber structure into the elevator and vice versa, bracing them together. I thought that was a good way to try and give a little bit of support to each of them from each other. As RC was mentioning, the pocketing was worrying me a little bit. It also looks like the intake got away from at one point and ended up a little bit wide, and so some of those bearings were actually running over the pocketing, which would probably create some nice ratcheting, so you wouldn't have to lock the elevator in place, but probably not what you're looking for. Overall, I thought it was a really great robot.
All right, Clint.
Yeah, same issues on the front faces of the pocketing. You're really not saving that much weight, so it's really, I don't think it's worth it to actually pocket out your bearing faces. One thing I noticed on that wasn't a huge, or I was mostly confused about on their intake was their bottom sheet thing comes to a point at the very front. I didn't quite understand what that was. It looked like it would just bend instantly and catch on the carpet constantly. But overall, great robot, lots of detail. Everything looked like it, had the potential to work if they, improved just a few things. So great job by Team 215 there.
All right, Garrison, end us off.
Yeah, so y'all covered most of the thing I was gonna talk about. I'll talk a little bit. I didn't love their motor allocation really. I thought on the drivetrain they had 6 sims, which to me, if you're still putting 6 sims on a drivetrain, I don't like that. I think that's wrong.
All right.
It's just it doesn't make any sense. Mechanically, power wise, what you get out of it is not worth it when mini sims exist. You can get just as much usable power out of a mini sim on drivetrain as you do out of a sim. So use those instead. Other than that, I didn't love their motor allocation. They had some weird stuff on the pivot too. They had 2 different motors. It needed to be that separated. Just basic stuff. Overall, I thought this robot was really good.
All right. So I just saw a message from this guy that said top 5 woo. And yes, you did it, Colin. You were in top 5. The number 5 team, Team 8, is made up of Colin Sherman from FRC 1710, who CAD'd up a really cool-looking robot with a large arm that telescopes at and allows for discs to be scored very quickly. So, Casey, start us off.
Yeah, so I thought this robot was really cool. As you said, they've got this telescoping arm. The way it drops down kind of reminds me of a 1678, 2016 kind of style. But then, of course, you need to reach up way higher than they did, so you throw it on an elevator, which is awesome. I thought it was really cool packaging. Being able to drive under the game board will give you a little bit of extra utility when you need to get around the field, get away from defense potentially. One note against them, there were a few details that I think would have been worked out really quickly once you tried to assemble it in real life, but there were a few CAD issues where things were interfering. And one big thing was there was a place where the gear mesh, there was only like 10% of the gear overlap, so you were definitely going to be stripping those gears really quick. But overall, I thought this was a really creative design. I scored it high in all aspects.
All right, Clint, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, exactly the same way as Casey. I thought this robot was very creative. I love the ability to go under the game board. I think that we've seen time and time again the ability to open up lanes that other teams don't have just gives you a ton of utility in strategy and match play. One thing that I had to knock them on a little bit was actually the disc scoring. It looks like in order to score these discs, they have to shoot them up and then down. Not a huge fan of that. But overall, I thought this robot was very good. I think they probably could have worked out their climbing at some point. I scored out high in every single category for sure.
Definitely. Garrison, do you agree?
Yeah, pretty much. Again, I had to dock them on effectiveness just because of the climb and some of those small issues that y'all were talking about. But creativity, I docked them on a little bit just because they took a good amount from Citrus Circuits. I mean, that's what the robot looks like. You look at it and go, hey, look, it's the Citrus robot from 2016. But they took it so much further, which is why they're in the top 5, right? I mean, they have that square drive. They have it on on this extending arm. It's a really good robot. Yeah, I scored them. I docked them a little bit on those 2 things, but well detailed. You see they had time to make a video and some great renders. Like, hey, nice job, guys.
All right, RC, how do you feel about it?
This is by far my favorite robot of them all because I was super fan of Citrus's 2016 robot, only because they knocked us out. So, definitely like the robot a lot. I think it's probably one of the coolest robots here. I think it could have ranked number 1 if it was able to score on the opposite side that it intake from. And I think one of the things that Colin, you could have done differently was if you split that tube axle to the edge of it instead of running all the way through and then move the gearbox down lower, you could have got another 2 feet out of your height. So I think the biggest thing for me was your setup of your elevator could have got you more height than what you have currently. So I think that was my biggest knock on it. But beyond that, it was my favorite to win it. That's number 5.
All right, so that's going to bring us to our 4th ranked team, which is Team 226, made up of Landon Coates and Ian Russell from FRC 6090, who designed a really nice robot with an awesome centrally located elevator that doubles for climbing and scoring discs in the high goal. Clint, can you start us off?
Yeah, this is a robot that had an immense amount of detail. Everything from the battery box up to the collection and elevator was very well done. I didn't score super high on the creativity aspect. I thought this was kind of a a standard robot that we've seen, elevator, collector, climber on the back. But detail and effectiveness, I scored them highly on for sure. I love the packaging of their elevator drums. So they actually packaged their elevator drums perpendicular to their drivetrain gearboxes so that they had enough footprint in the robot. I thought that was a very clever detail that made this robot package a lot better.
All right, Garrison, jump in there.
Yeah, I agree with Clint, like almost 100% basically. Great robot. It felt like something like 2056 would build, right? Where you look at it and go, yeah, of course. I mean, it makes sense. It had some pretty clever stuff going on, but it's not real creative in the way it plays the game. It's pretty straightforward. But I mean, I gave him a 10 on effectiveness. I think this is they play the game basically as good as any of these robots, I think. And so, yeah, I love the mid-centered elevator. I thought it fixed some of the problems a lot of other teams had. Very good robot.
Yep. RC, how do you feel?
I like the overall design. Thought it was well done. I thought the people put a lot of effort into this one. I just wanted the intake rollers to be further out, is my only gripe. And then I think everything else was pretty solid. I did like what Clint said, too. I did like the elevator packing for the drums. That was pretty sweet. And then beyond that, nothing else.
All right, Casey, end us off.
Yeah, so this was one that after seeing a lot of elevators where the hooks were so far forward, I thought that this was one that might have actually nailed it. This was another one that I think may have actually been able to reach that top rung. One slight gripe about it, it seemed like if you had actually CADed the wires, you would see like those sims were super close to the frame perimeter. So those wires might actually go outside frame perimeter or be really tight pressed to stay in. So that was just something that, it's a really small detail that you might have been able to eke out. But that was also a mini rant of mine, is just consideration of wires for a lot of these teams. Designing to 120 pounds when you have an elevator that's going to extend up 116 inches. You have like 40 feet of 12 gauge wire. It's going to add several pounds that people aren't accounting for.
Yep. That is definitely something that teams should watch out for, and something that people don't do in CAD, and they definitely should. So it's something to think about. So as we enter our top three, all of these teams will be either receiving $25, $50, or $100 gift cards from Vexpro and Aussie Boards. Plus, each of these teams will receive 2 analog device gyro boards. So these teams are going to have a lot of stuff coming to them. And in the third ranked spot, we have team 183. It's actually a solo team made up of Kevin Luminato from FRC 1533, who designed an incredible robot capable of scoring discs with ease, as well as climbing a ladder at the end. So Garrison, start us off here.
Well, first of all, Kevin, congratulations. This is a heck of a robot, especially for one person in just 3 days. I really, really like it. You can see it can score from the top. I don't know if Tyler has all the renders up. He made some pretty good ones. He made the renders on the field, which is really helpful. You can see how it scores. Yeah, there it is. Look at how it scores. That is awesome. That is thinking through this game correctly and realizing that you need to score these discs vertically. This robot was just very well thought out. I thought it had a very good intake. It captured the disc all the way through, had a pretty unique elevator, scored high in just about every category.
Yep. All right. RC, jump in here.
I agree with Garrison. Pretty creative. I love the scoring. I think for me is the render that I saw was the one that's on the screen. Was the one I was like, oh, okay, I actually see what the robot does now. I see how effective it's going to be. And it's going to do a pretty good job. And I think the only knock for me was definitely size of the bearings, a little bit bigger for your elevator. Those bearings are tiny, especially if you're going to hang with the elevator. You got to be careful about that kind of stuff. But beyond that, it was a pretty sweet robot, lots of details, especially a single user. It's pretty cool to see.
All right, Casey, jump in here.
Yeah, I thought it was definitely an awesome effort. I really like the tilted elevator because as that elevator rises, that CG is going to stay at least front to back pretty centered in the robot, which I thought was a good touch to make sure you're not tipping over as you're extending. Also, as we talked about in that render of them scoring in the game board, it looked like they'd be able to just drive up flush against the game board to a line, which is going to save a lot of time, not having to nail that distance like some of the other robots are to get the perfect alignment to be able to drop it right in. And I also thought that the intake looked like it would work well, which is obviously a big point of the game.
Yep. Clint, end us off here.
Yeah, so I was very impressed with this robot, especially I don't know if you guys noticed in this guy's scouting sheet, he's actually the lead mechanical designer for an FTC team, and then is also helping out on an FRC team. So I thought that was a great crossover. I think this robot nails it on almost all fronts. I love keeping the CG over the drivetrain. I think a lot of teams missed out on that. This robot seems to be pretty stable while it's scoring. Like Casey said, using the game board to register was a huge thing I think a lot of teams missed out on in terms of just speed lining up to the goals. That's always a big thing. Overall, amazing job. Especially considering FTC student designing an FRC robot. I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, and Kevin, this was actually my favorite robot, so shout out to you over there. Now this is big. We're going to move to our second ranked team, and it is Team 157, made up of Isaac Fritz and Ramsey Hamad from FRC 1369, as well as Rafi Pedersen from FRC 449. They designed a beautiful robot with an awesome mechanism to score discs completely vertically. And RC, can you start us off with this one?
I thought the robot was pretty cool. I like the color scheme, as always. And then for me, the highlight feature was a substance of gearbox for the elevator. I really enjoyed the spools having like a printed part to guide the rope. That was pretty slick. I didn't like the handoff because, I'm not a fan. Kind of like Clint, not a fan of mechanics, a docu one. So, but beyond that, I thought it was a really cool robot. It was well done. I love the details. And I like the wheelie bar too. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah. Casey, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, that last part you touched on was one of my favorite parts. I love the inclusion of the wheelie bar. That last robot we were looking at kept the CG centered. This one just says, I don't care, I got a wheelie bar, so I've got a really long profile, so I'm going to avoid tipping that way. I also liked, this is a CAD contest. It's not a software contest, but the inclusion of sensors on this one was big, making sure that they're integrated early on in the design so that the software team at least has something to work with to try and, figure out how to move all the things to the right places. I thought that was a cool touch to make sure to say, I know these arms are going to have to be controlled in this way. I know the elevator is going to have to be controlled. I have a way that the software team is going to be able to register that. I'm not having to figure that out later.
Yep. All right, Clint.
Yeah, I mean, this robot scored high across the board. Very complex conceptually, but they executed on all aspects of the design. Whether or not their team would have the ability to control this effectively is irrelevant in a CAD competition. I scored them high across the board. Love the wheelie bar. Very 33 2015-esque. Overall, just great job.
And Garrison, end us off.
Yeah, I just want to echo what these guys said. I love this robot. I think my favorite thing about it is just how well thought through it was. They clearly iterated a couple of times. They realized where some of the pitfalls in this game were with the CG issue and that wheelie bar. You can tell there's just a lot of thought and a lot of experience that went into building this. You can clearly see the difference between this one, which, these are people that definitely played an FRC game before and had struggles and, built maybe some of the robots that we saw earlier in the show. And now, they come up and they have like all these experiences, the wheelie bar, the over-the-top intake, are scoring like some really clever details to this robot that put it over the top. Just a belt intake and, a handoff. We've seen some of those already, but the reason this is top two is because of, all the thought that really went into this robot.
All right, so that is going to be leading us to our number one ranked team, and that is for the third time in a row, Team 62, made up of Brian Machado and Ivan Yavenko from FRC 1360. Team 62's robot is meticulously cladded literally down to an Ethernet cable and features a massive 10-foot telescoping arm that not only allows the robot to score discs, but also allows it to climb. Casey, let's start it off.
Yeah, so obviously I really love this robot. That's why it's ranked number one. I thought the integration of everything into that one arm seemed really cool and really smart, just making sure finding a way to package everything going on there. As you said, even some of the wires were CADed. There was a lot of deep detail there. Obviously, a lot of effort was put in to make sure that, this would almost represent an actual robot like you'd be able to see in the pits. They also put a lot of detail into the strategy, laying everything out there. My one complaint about it was that with this arm, especially when it starts extending, you may see a little bit of backlash, and so control might be a little bit fun. Also, I don't think that I saw a break or hard stop, so again, the pivot arm stalling might be a little bit of an issue, but, I think that could be solved easily.
All right, Clint, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I thought I thought they did a great job. Scored high across the board from creativity, detail, and effectiveness. I like the addition of the wrist at the end of these telescoping arms. A lot of teams in the past have had kind of a fixed collector at the end. You look at Spectrum from this year, look at any of the Pink Team arms in the past. A lot of them don't have that actuating wrist at the end. The packaging that they came up with was actually really interesting to me. They have a couple bevel gears with a nested, I think it's a bag motor. One of the screenshots I have actually has like a dual versus planetary input, but I think that was a mistake. But it's all nested inside this telescoping tube, so it still stays within the profile of acceptability for that telescope. So another absolutely amazing detail. I love the robot. I think that they nailed it front to back. Just very well done.
All right, Garrison, keep rolling.
Yeah, for sure. So many good things going on with this robot, especially done in just 3 days. These guys have now won a couple of times in a row. They were just really smart about how they used COTS parts. Like even the COTS parts they used were done creatively, right? You go look at how they did all the Vexpro stuff, like Clint said. Go look at how they did that pivot arm. They have a shifting gearbox built into the back of their arm. Like they did a lot of really cool stuff, really unique stuff that I felt would actually work. If you saw this robot on the field, everything on it was pretty wild, but they did it well, thought through it, and I felt like everything on it was reasonably effective. There was nothing that jumped out and go, man, that's crazy. It's never going to work. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff on this robot. I've scored it perfectly in creativity. It's pretty wild, but very, very well done, guys. Congratulations.
All right, RC, end off the show.
So to end it off, I love this bot. I think it's pretty crazy. I like crazy stuff. For me, the top favorite thing was I love the Ethernet cord CADed in. Totally useless, but pretty awesome. The belly pad was actually done correctly. I've seen so many belly pads this weekend. I'm like, man, they're done badly or wrong. I actually like the fact that on the gearbox they used versus planetaries into a gear reduction, into a chain reduction that was 35 chain. That was actually really well done. A lot of teams just doing BPs, like 3-4 stages into something else. That was kind of scary to see. Like what Clint said, I actually enjoyed the fact that the end pivots with a really compact setup. That was really neat to see. I've never seen that actually before. And overall, I really like the fact that it was well integrated. I like the structure worked out. I like the CAD was done well. And I enjoyed the small details because for me, this competition was about the small details that separated the winners from the losers, I guess. Or not the winners. I don't know how you want to put it.
No, they're losers, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, the top 5 robots were really well done, so it made the other robots hard to judge because these students put a lot of effort in. So for me, it's always about the effort, the quality of work, and all the small details, especially the Ethernet cable. That was, I think, the winner for me. So,
all right. And as crazy as it sounds, this team was also judged independently by VexPro for having the best VexPro application and will also receive an additional $50 VexPro gift card. So the day is not going to be too bad for Team 62.
First Updates Now FRC is produced in partnership with viewers like you. Want to be our boss? Tell us what we're worth and have a say in how our shows are ran? Visit our Patreon to pledge your support at patreon.com/funfrc.